So I emphasized prior to the break some of the notable virtues that that attend us when we divide up. We have a separation of concerns. We have separate state charts for separate types of concerns. We don't have to handle all possibilities together, but we can still secure interactions betwixt them, dependencies, when we wish to do so. And it's for an illustration of that task that we now turn our attention. It is to that task to which we now turn our attention. Okay, so I would like to go to the person within this context, and I would like to add in a state chart for weight. And as would stand to reason, we will call this name weight state chart. Okay, great. Excellent. And I'd like to add in an element. So we're going to have normal and underweight as one category. We are going to add in overweight as another category. And finally, we will add in obese as another category. Okay? These are state charts. Now, we are going to now put in place some transitions between these states. And for the moment, we'll confine our attention predominantly to rate-based transitions. Transitions where there's a certain hazard of transitioning them. A per time unit, in this case per year, because it's a time unit of the model, hazard associated with these quantities. Tomorrow, starting in the morning, we will start turning attention to additional sorts of these transitions, which can be very powerful. Okay, so I'd like you to drag in a transition from normal and underweight to overweight. And we'll lend these simple names. So in this case, I'd like to call it becoming overweight. Okay. Here we go. Becoming overweight. And I would once again encourage you to show the name here, and we'll position it accordingly. We will have in place here a transition value, and for the moment we will make use of a simple value here. My thought would be, if people, depending how adventurous people are feeling, how many people here would feel interested in seeing a transition hazard which changes over time according to the age of a person? That be of interest? The ayes have it. Okay. Okay. We will set our goals on that query. So, in order to put that into place, we'll need two components. And often this is the way that we must proceed. We want to put a mechanism in place. Here we have a kind of placeholder value for that transition. In order to do that, we need some work done. What are the two things we need to secure that? Well, we need some way of, first of all, we need some way of computing for a given age. What is the hazard rate for that age? Secondly, we need a way of computing what is the age of a person, right? Here, the time frame of the model is years. We're concerned with factors that play out over the span of years, if not decades. And therefore, it is not suitable to treat these people as having a fixed age. Okay? We will want to have that age change over time. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is to put into place a mechanism that will be up to that. Okay? Now, I do so with a certain hesitancy because we have a half-built state chart, and any logic will be most unhappy with half-built state charts. What I would suggest is we put in place a placeholder rate, we finish building the state chart, and we'll then put into place that time-varying transition, that age-varying transition. Are you okay with that? So we will come back to that within 5 minutes, and we'll complete the job. But first, let's get it so that any logic isn't throwing a tantrum about having a half-built state chart, because we want to be able to build early, build often, as we build up this more complex mechanism to compute age, and I don't want it complaining about all this extraneous stuff on the state chart. Half-built, half-baked. Are we okay with that? Okay, so let's put in place some placeholder things. We'll have becoming overweight, and then we'll have an overweight to obesity. And for the moment, we can even leave it like that. For overweight to obesity, I'm going to put in place a simple mechanism of 0.2 per, not 0.2 per year. It will be 0.05 per year. I'm going to put in place a basic one. We'll come back and do so this would be becoming obese, okay? But we're going to come and do an age-based one, okay? For this becoming overweight. And we could, by the same token, apply the same one to this. Now this has a certain finality to it, which is distressing right now, but we'll return to this issue and put in some reverse transitions. Well, let's do it now, okay? Great. We'll put in a reverse transition from obesity back to overweight here. Make that a rate transition and make it perhaps 0.02 per year. It's a maybe more than that, 0.05 per year. 5% chance per year roughly. And then similarly from overweight back to normal and underweight, maybe we'll put on an average time of let's see, what did we make this, 0.05? We'll make this a rate of 0.1, okay? Okay, so let me just rehearse this. I put in some placeholder values for things. Becoming overweight, normal weight to underweight to becoming overweight, I'm going to put in as the average time here 0.03 per year. This is going to placeholder. We're going to replace this shortly. Becoming overweight to becoming obese, I put in 0.05 per year. Losing obesity, I'm going to put in 0.05 per year. And then losing overweight, maybe I should call it shedding overweight, losing overweight, I'm going to put in 0.1 per year, okay? And I'll make these all show names. There we go. Your model should look something like this.
Sorry, what was losing obesity, 0.05?
Yes. Anyone have a question about the others? Question? Sorry? Sure. For becoming overweight, this is the one we're going to replace in a minute, but it's 0.03 per year. 0.03 per year. For becoming obese, it is 0.05 per year. For becoming obese, 0.05. Losing obesity, 0.05 per year. And losing overweight, 0.1 per year. Okay? Now, these values, when we've done this sort of work, we've derived these values from a number of studies, perfectly longitudinal studies that show individuals' transitions. If you're willing to go back in time some distance, the NCDS, for example, from Britain following over this birth cohort study, longitudinal nature, but of course there's many other studies that have been done since then which could be used to try to calibrate these rates. Now, we will show, this is, for those purposes, that's a teaching model, but we are going to put in place a mechanism that's going to be more representative of what will be needed to capture it in a more rigorous level. And we're going to start with one that has these rates varied by age. And we will then put in place some additional mechanisms that might have them varied by other rates varied by other quantities too. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's just build our model, make sure it builds happily. And now, if it builds happily, build completed successfully, I would like to turn our attention to having age-specific rates. What do you think? Good? Okay. Okay. So remember, I characterized there as being two subtasks having an age-specific rate. Number one, we need to know what the rate is for a given age. Second, we need to be able to compute the age. Okay? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us first turn our attention to the first of those. I'd like to go to the palette. And from the palette, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to draw your attention to the agent palette. And you will find there a thing called table function. Do you see that? I'd like you to drag in the table function. Okay? And this table function will be entitled, becoming overweight for, or becoming overweight hazard for age. How about gaining overweight hazard by age? Okay? Gaining overweight hazard by age. Okay? It's a table function. Naming is not a small matter. We software engineers spend a lot of time sweating our names. Why? Because of issues of transparency. We want, if anyone looks at this code, they'll know what it does. We want people, when they look at a model, even if they're not sure what it is, they can look at the name and say, oh, I bet I kind of know what that's representing at least. This is important because transparency is important for confidence. And confidence is important for buy-in. And buy-in is important for success in terms of implementation, in terms of actually getting feedback on the model, in terms of stakeholder engagement, making that sustainable. Okay, so gaining overweight hazard by age. You'll notice that we can fill this out here. This is a table function. We can specify for what value does it, what is the value for a given age, what's the value associated with it. So I'd like to fill this out, folks. We're going to have it be successively the argument 5, and for 5 it will be 0.02. You notice it's doing interpolation. If we ask for a value that's between it, it will interpolate the values. For 10, ladies and gentlemen, it will be a value of 0.03. For 20, arguably there should be more detail there at adolescence, 0.025. For 30, for 40, which is a little bit paying less attention to important reproductive years, which are important for some weight issues. So it could be critiqued, but this is just to give the flavor of it. For 60, 0.05, and for 90, 0.1. Okay? Now, if you've defined that, so again, 0, it's 0, it's 5, it's 0.02, 10, it's 0.03, 20, 0.025, 40, 0.04, 60, 0.05, 90, 0.1. Would anyone like me to read that out again? This is a visual depiction. If you scroll down a little bit, it kind of shows how it varies by age. Okay? Okay? So obviously these numbers could be different, and these could be derived. These could be derived through a biostatistical analysis that looked at from a probably would be a survival analysis in this case. What's the likelihood of becoming overweight? It might be a recurrent event analysis if this changing of weight status is frequent enough. You might try to understand how it varies with age on the one hand, versus and tease that out from other measures such as socioeconomic status or income, etc. Try to tease it down. Okay, how does age influence this, and have that feed into it? Yes.
Can you actually copy and paste your
You can paste it in so you don't have to type it. That's exactly what this does here. You can paste from the clipboard, and you can also export it. You could copy here and, for example, paste it into Excel is the most obvious thing. Okay, this is actually just copying that one, but I can copy the entire thing here, and if I wish to export it, I could copy it into Excel. Very commonly, we use those things to exchange from Excel. You just do paste and you populate it. So you notice also you can set the interpolation, how it interpolates between points, and how it handles out of range. So if you ask about a 95-year-old, what does it say? And I'm going to say for out of range, use the nearest one. So if we ask about a 95-year-old, it will use the rate for 90. Okay?
Can you have more than one variable? So could you have, say, some socioeconomic class within that table or not? Do you have to create a new state to do that? Or have you transferred?
Regrettably, the answer is within this built-in table, it only allows one domain associated with it. It only allows for one X value, one lookup variable. But first of all, you could do that with a software engineer. You could have that in place if you had someone build a little mechanism. So Dylan, and people with Dylan mind skills, sure, that's no problem. But more to the point, what you typically will do. This is a very good question. What we'll typically do in those cases is we might decompose it to be a conditional distribution. So this might be, for example, gaining overweight hazard for males and gaining overweight hazard for females would be a separate one. So it would be a conditional distribution rather than trying to describe the joint. And when you have two continuous variables like age and birth weight, that becomes more tricky, but you could potentially quantize birth weight and create separate distributions for each. But really, I mean, putting in place a multi-dimensional lookup would not be terribly hard. I mean, it could be done in less than a few days' time by a skilled software engineer, and then it could be reused for many models. But thank you for that question. It could be done. The simplest way to do it with categorical or discrete variables would be to make it a conditional table function. Other questions? These are great questions. Okay, so we've accomplished task one. To wit, we've provided a way for looking up for a given age what the overweight hazard is. Now, the remaining task is to determine what the age of a person is it not? But to do so in a way that affords people to change over time. Now, there's any number of ways we could do that, and perhaps for some of you those ways are circulating. Could we use a state chart to keep track of their age? We have age categories, and every 5 years they go to the next category. Yes, we could do that. You could do that at the level of an individual year. Straightforward, well within our means. What sort of transition, if we use the state chart, let's suppose advancing every 5 years, what sort of transition would we be using? Would it be a rate transition? Or what sort of transition? It will be a,
Step.
yeah, and it's called a timeout transition. It means, in other words, and I think it's exactly what you're thinking of, it's at exactly that time. See this timeout? That means exactly 5 years after you enter this age category, go on to the next. Well, we have models like that. There's another way too. You could use a variable, right? You could use a variable to keep track of your age, increment it, keep on raising it every year, raise it by 1. You could do that. But it turns out that both of those are needlessly cumbersome. You could do it, and sometimes they're useful. Sometimes you have the state chart in addition to the method I'll describe. But it turns out there's a technically elegant mechanism for doing this that will demand a little of your patience, but it will reward itself in terms of generality and precision and flexibility. Okay? May I show you this? Okay. Thank you. Because, amongst other things, I'd like to ask before I inflict something upon you. At least I have consent. Okay? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, it won't be too bad. And we won't have to lock the door for this one. Okay. Great. So, watch this. We will start by creating something that will seem perhaps of uncertain relevance. If you go to the palette, I'd like you to add, well, you tell me. Suppose we want to keep track of the birthday of a person. How do we do that? What sort of thing? Would that be a variable? It would be a parameter. It doesn't need to change. We communicate to the person at the time that they're born. Great. Okay. So this is would be a parameter. And we'll call it, I'd like to call it birth date, but there's actually a separate thing. I'm going to call it, I know you folks won't like this, but just for conceptual clarity on the part of people, I'm going to call it birth time. It's the time in the model. It starts at time 0. So if it's 0, when the model starts, they've just been born. If it's their birth time is minus 10, that means when the model starts, they're how old? 10 years old. 10 years old. If their birth time is minus 50, the model starts at time 0, they're how old? 50 years old. And if they're born during the model, they'll have appropriate birth times later. You know, maybe they're born at time 2 and it's now model time 10, and so their age will be what? They're born at 2 and it's now 10, their age will be 8. Yeah. So 10 minus 2. Okay? So that would be the idea here. So we're going to have a birth time. That's kind of the birth date. Yes, any logic actually has calendar dates. It knows about leap years. It knows about holidays. It knows about weekends. And you can ask it all sorts of stuff about that. But actually, I'm not sure about the holidays. I better check that. There was something I thought I saw which said holidays. They certainly have weekends, weekdays.
Possibly be wrong for Australia anyway.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, and maybe again the American Imperial. Yeah, we probably don't have Canadian Thanksgiving in there. Okay. So in any case, we're going to have, it does have calendars, but for this, we don't need to go into that detail. We'll just have birth time. Okay? Now, I'm going to pull in something that's going to allow you to ask, at any time we can ask what their age is. And that thing will be called a function. Okay, now, this may start seeming scary. This function will be called current age. Okay? Current age. Now, when I create things, I know it will seem strange, but I'm often fighting internally about what the name should be. And the pragmatic side just won out over the Java purist side. So it's called current age. Okay, now, this is the first time we've defined a function. A function wraps up some computation so we can perform it. We could just say, give me current age, and it will do it. We don't have to worry about all the gory details of it when we need it. So we're going to put the gory details inside here. And believe me, they won't be too gory. Okay? Okay, so having highlighted that, so it's over here, we're going to say this returns a value. Its job in life is to compute something, not to do something, just to compute it, to return a value. Okay? And what does it need for its parameters? Well, again, the Java purist inside of me, there's a civil war right now going on in my head about the best way to do this. But I am going to be pragmatic and focus on the pedagogy. So the pragmatic side of me is won out over the software engineer, and it's sulking right now. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to run, is to return, what value is it going to return? It's going to return the current. Well, let's think about it. If it's time 10 and I was born at time 2, how old am I? Oh, sorry? 8 years old. If it's time 0 and I was born at time minus 10, how old am I? 10. So in general, give me a formula for it. It involves the current time and then what? Minus the birth time. Good. That's all there is. Okay. So it turns out in any logic we call the current time this. By the way, this is, you can look this thing up on that sheet I gave you. Remember I said I gave you a sheet of common any logic functions. You can look those. Where? Sorry?
Where is it?
The sheet is in the website with all the materials. And may I point you to it? Here? It's in this participant resources. These stand awaiting. And it's in this thing called handy references. And this provides common things, many of which you have done. Oops. Okay. This is, there's some displeasure being experienced here. Pardon me for just a moment as I think I'm having some sort of network. Oh, no, here it is. There it is. And here it is. All these things. See these things? Population size, add population. We'll be coming, look, here are things to read from an Excel file, or write to an Excel file rather. Things to sort of move around, etc. So you might want to look at that, okay? Okay. So let's return our attention here. Birth time. This is what we want. Return the current time minus the birth time. Okay? Is that okay? Okay, that's all we want. This current time, this is just a function we're calling. We're not giving it. We don't need to give it anything for it to do its job. It'll return the current time. We'll subtract the birth time from it. That's my current age. Are you okay with that? Okay. Okay, we're almost done. We just got to put the pieces together now. And then we've got to put in place a nod to the any logic constraints. Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, just about done. Becoming overweight, this transition. Now we will simply ask to look up the hazard in this table function for the current age, for my current age. Does that make sense? I'll call the current age, give me our current age, and then I'll look it up in this table function. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's line these up. Okay, you ready for that? Okay, here we go. Okay, great. Okay, here we go. Gaining overweight hazard by age. Notice I'm selecting the first of these. Oh, come on. Hey, you. Okay, it's behaving badly. Hey, get over there. Okay. There we go. Okay. Get down there. Hey, you. Okay, Dylan, this is most interesting dysfunction. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't do autocomplete properly, and It's very, very curious. Is it exhibiting similar dysfunction for you?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we'll just have to, oh, there it went. Look at that. Okay, I'm sorry it's not just me. So we'll do this, gaining weight, overweight as and by age based on my current age. Okay, why am I doing this thing here? Because current age is a function. I'm saying, give me the current age, and it's going to give me back my current age. It just doesn't need anything given to it to do its job. That's why it's an empty open bracket and closed bracket. By contrast, this table function needs a value to look up. Remember, we specified in the table function, we look up this value, we turn it into another value. That's why it needs this value to be given for it. And that's why we need to give it the value of the current age. Does that make sense? You have to say, look up the value of the current age in the table, and it will return for us a value. Are you okay with that? Okay, we're just about done. That's as painful as it gets. But there's one pinprick left. Are you ready for that? Okay. Okay. And for that pinprick, we'll now turn our attention. Here we go. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. Okay? Okay, I will need to do something. So I will tell you a regrettable secret. Okay? It doesn't automatically compute as your age, automatically recompute the hazard. You have to tell it how often you want it to be recomputed. So what we're going to do is we're going to put something into this state chart that will get it to recompute the hazard. And let me show you what it is. It will do this. We'll have a self transition. I know, say it ain't so, but sometimes you got to live with things, and it ain't too bad. Okay, so in this case, every one month, maybe we'll have it recompute this. Every month, it'll recompute the age, and it'll do this. We could have it do it every week if we want to. The point is it has to recompute it. Okay, yeah, I know, it's a truculent beast. Okay, can I show you? Okay, watch this. Sorry, I exhibit tacit knowledge of those things. Okay, so I just dragged this down and I started in a most innocuous fashion. And then I position it over like, Then I double clicked here. Now by adding these things, you can actually bend it to your will. And then I actually added 2 of them just to sort of get it to be nice breadth so it wouldn't double over on itself. And then I went like that. And I'm not very good at it, but the key is to put in these extra handles. And by so doing, you can have it kind of, you can actually enjoy a fair measure of control over its flexibility. Okay, I know. Okay, is that okay? Were you able to do that? Okay, I know it's most unpleasant. Okay, are you ready? Okay. I'm sorry. That was for normal and underweight, and that's the reason. The reason I only have to do it there. Does anyone understand what's the reason I only have to do it there? It's because this is the only place leaving this state that it depends on age, and it's really basically it needs to recompute this hazard rate every year is what this is or every month is what this is saying. So every month it will recompute this hazard. By leaving the state and coming into it, it'll figure out, okay, what's the hazard for going out of here? That's the logic. And I wish it weren't so. We'll see other cases where we don't have to do this because it just depends on when another state chart changes. And it automatically takes care of that, but not of this. it doesn't know the age is changing and it needs to recompute it, we have to tell it to do that. That's again, I'm not here to say this is great. It's just I'm trying to be realistic about what's needed, and this is a pattern which is sometimes needed if you have it depending on something that's changing. Ugly, but it's not the worst thing I've ever dealt with. Okay, you ready? Okay, I know. Sometimes you just need to live with it. Okay, so let's build this thing. And should we run it? What do you think? Run it or not? Okay, there we go. Okay, let's go down and look at a particular person. So here we see this transition firing away on a regular basis. Okay, and let's go and look up. Okay, so this is age 15 now. Okay, I would have expected. Okay, yep, and someone became overweight. Oh, look at this, they're overweight. Okay, they're about to lose overweight. Boom. Oh, or they're becoming obese. Oh, they became obese. Okay. Okay. Who needs help? Who needs help? Okay. Okay. We have a 3-alarm fire. Okay. So. Okay. Okay. I know what it is. Yeah. And does it say out of range?
Yeah, out of range.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's and that occurred after a long time. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So folks, thank you very much. So folks, you may have missed a small bit of finesse that I applied, but it was small enough it may have gone unnoticed. May I draw your attention in this table function? May I draw your attention to the thing that I said out of range, use nearest? And what that means is if it asks for someone who's 95 years old, or 90, more than 90, it will just use the rate for 90. Yes?
Just also in population,
Correct. It defaults to 0. Thank you. We should go do that, though, for completeness. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so folks, let's go here. Joanne pointed out we forgot to specify, and this is my current dysfunction. We have to go to main, and we should really specify the birth time for an individual. Let us go specify, this is important, let us specify a birth time between, what do you think, maybe, minus 80 and 0. Now, that's not going to be too realistic because we're starting everyone off in a normal glycemic normal weight state. We'll deal with that in a moment or soon, but just be aware we're going to have a sort of a period where the data is not realistic, but at least we'll have an age distribution here, and here we go. Okay. So here people are losing weight, some are gaining weight. Okay, and some have become diabetic. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost done with our task here, but we have an additional component, an additional element that we want to put into place that is thankfully simpler. And that has to do with linking up this state chart and transition with this one. We want to have interactions between the state charts. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask this. When we wanted people to change color based on their diabetes status, when we wanted to signal, have people change color based on their diabetes status, how did we achieve that? What did we add to the model to allow that to be possible? what did we add? When we wanted them to change color to reflect their diabetes status, what did we use to encode that information, to capture that, to tell the oval or the person up here to turn a different color? What did we use? We used we used a color variable, didn't we? Remember that? Okay. So now, riddle me this. Suppose that we wanted the hazard rate of developing diabetes to be determined by in which state you're located over here. So if you're located in overweight state, if you're normal and underweight, it'll be a comparatively low hazard rate for developing diabetes. Overweight, a higher one. And obese, a higher one yet. Suppose we wanted that. How could we get this state chart to tell this one what rate to use for this? We could add a what? A variable. We could do the same sort of thing that we used to communicate from this guy up to here. We could add a variable that would tell it what hazard rate to use here. Could we not? Let's do so. Okay? You ready to do this? Okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like to add in a variable here that we're going to use to encode that information. Okay? And we are going to add the variable. Where do we go to add a variable? Can you tell me? Go to agent. You folks are great. Okay, that's good. Here's a variable. You see that? Okay, let's drag it in here. And now let's call this something befitting its significance. Befitting its, lending it dignity. So let's call it developing diabetes. Okay, you folks won't like this, I know. Hazard contribution from current weight. Okay? Okay, let me put that up there in all its glory. Okay? Okay, believe me, we're gonna add to this model. So we've done some recent biostatistical analysis that shows a quite significant effect not only of the current weight, but of the accumulated, the weight history. The history of adiposity, as it were, in the person. Yeah.
Sorry, why, I understand you're trying to make this long, I assume, for clarity?
For clarity.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying that's going to be really clear. We're going to get to word pieces.
What would be easier, alpha? Okay, I welcome it. There's a couple ways to make it clear. One way is to make a brief name like alpha that you then can look up in a separate document for what it represents. That can be clear to the modeler, but it's hard for someone who comes to the model for the first time to look at it and know what it represents. Maybe interaction, I like that. So let's come up with a good name. I'm not partial to this. So what would be a good name?
Can you use like underscores?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is what's called a camel case, where you capitalize each component. But I'd say use a convention that you're comfortable with and you find is clear, and that includes for naming it. So maybe it's interaction. Okay, so let's choose it. What is it? Diabetes hazard current weight. Okay, interaction, diabetes hazard current weight. How's that?
Well, just interaction, diabetes, current and weight. Making sure.
Diabetes and weight. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Now, some people might want to put it with underbars, like this guy. You might want to put underbars to visually distinguish it. again, you can choose, and different groups will have different conventions for this as to what they're comfortable with. As long as you're consistent, you're welcome to use what you see fit. I rather like this one. I think that's recommended both by brevity and by clarity, so there we go. Is that good? Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for that feedback. That's great. Okay, so where is this going to have to be set? Wherein will this need to be set? Okay, it will need to determine this transition rate, right? Where will it need to change? Well, what I'm saying here is that we could actually here within each of these assign it a value. So in other words, this thing here will currently, and we're going to come back and change this, maybe it will be some basal value, 0.001 plus this guy here, right? Be some intercept term plus some amount from the current weight. And then for this weight here, it will change. Alternatively, we may just want to do this, and then for normal and underweight, it will be 0.01, something like that. For overweight, it would be 0.02, and for obese, it would be 0.05, something like that. Do you see what I'm doing here? So let me go through those again, and I'll try to communicate the logic. At a very high level way here, ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to hitch up a way for the current weight to change the risk on a per year basis of developing diabetes, right? That's our high level goal here. Names aside, issues of how we've implemented aside, that's really our goal. Now, one simple way to achieve that is through a variable. And very helpfully, the name was shortened. That's great. Excellent. But in order to use this variable, we need to assign it values. So in other words, really what this is saying right now, until we add some additional variables in, right now what it's saying is, what's the per year probability, the chance per year, the hazard of developing diabetes for someone who's normal and underweight? When someone's in that state, what is their chance per year of developing diabetes? What's the hazard rate? Then, when they're overweight, what's their chance per year of developing diabetes? When they are obese, what's their hazard per year, their annualized hazard of developing diabetes? And it's here at 0.05. Okay, we've set it. Why are we setting it here in each of these? Well, because we want to change this rate over here every time when someone's weight status changes. If they become normal and underweight, we want to register they're at lower risk. If they become overweight, we want to register the fact they're at a moderate level of risk. Obese, we want to register the fact from now on, while they're in this state, they're at that higher level of risk. Of course, if they leave obesity and become overweight, their risk will be going down. Do you understand that? This is very similar to what we did with color here, right? We set color to be green here, color to be red here. We're just using that same basic mechanism. And, okay. And then we are using it. Wherein do we use it? We use it right here. This is this rate. It's just the value of that variable is this rate. That's the hazard rate. Does that make sense? Okay. So who would like me to comment more on it or to show you some of these values? The value I used here was again 0.001. Now this value, we selected it here. Here for overweight, it's 0.02. For obese, it's 0.05. maybe we should, for normal and under, maybe we should make it a little bit bigger. Maybe 0.005. What do you think? Something like that? I'm wondering that may be a wee bit low. And for overweight, maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's okay with that. And for obese. Anyone want to change these things? Feel more comfortable with the different value? Maybe for obesity it should be a bit higher. Yeah.
So when it says entry action, if you had another variable where you wanted to define it, it would be another entry action.
So if you wanted another variable, let's suppose you want to change the color here. You just say color equals, pink. Yeah, so when someone enters that state, whatever is here, whatever commands are here will be executed. Whatever so-called statements, they'll be performed. And you could assign to many different things here. And in fact, we will soon do that. Okay? Great. Any other questions? Does this make sense? Okay, so should we run it? Now, you'll notice I didn't have to do something here. I didn't have to have it loop back to have it recompute this. And that's because it automatically actually does that when another state chart changes. It automatically will do that.
Could you show us the development value transition?
Yeah. All it is the value of this variable. That is the hazard rate.
Oh, it's that the variable.
It's just that variable.
That has different number depends on underweight, overweight.
In other words, depending on what state you have here, it will determine this hazard rate.
And we haven't built in age into there, right?
We haven't yet built an age. We could do that, and we're going to be working in that direction of including additional covariates into that. And I'm trying to give you a realistic sense, like if you were building up a model, how might you start to work towards putting in place mechanisms that would take into account several lines of evidence, impact of age, impact of current weight, impact of other factors, perhaps ethnicity or birth weight or what have you. How would that impact things? And I'm going to show you by sort of how you could tease it out in terms of beta terms and so on. We're just starting here, okay? Okay, are we comfortable with that? Yes. Sure. This transition, this mystery transition, its job in life is to get any logic to recompute this hazard. Because this hazard is changing based on their current age, right? This hazard, remember this is the one we looked up based on their current age. We looked up what's their hazard for that age. And so as they age, it needs to you need to tell it like, hey, go recompute that transition. Because it doesn't know to automatically do it. It's unfortunate. If we had a state chart for age, it would automatically do it. But we don't have a state chart for age, so it doesn't know how to do that automatically. Well, we told it's computed every month. It interpolates for the values for different years. If you only feel you need it on a year-by-year basis, you could actually save significant computing time by changing this to update yearly, in which case we'd only need to update it once a year. Okay? So if you feel comfortable with that, you could do it once a year. I would just emphasize it doesn't have to be done on a yearly basis. And in fact, this year will interpolate, so it will, if you're 5 years and 1 month old, it will not be exactly 0.02, it will be 0.0201 or something like that. It will actually be interpolating between these values. If you're 7.5 years old, it will be 0.025 because it's doing linear interpolation between these. Does that make sense? So the point is that by doing it every month, it'll be recomputing it, but sure, we could do it once a year. It's probably accurate enough. It's just I didn't want you to think it has to be done on a year-by-year basis, so I picked month. And I figured, well, it's accurate enough. Okay. Other questions? Yeah?
In the function of getting overweight hazard by age,
Yeah.
if you put the table data as by one single year, then you don't need to have that
circle transition, do you? Because then your transition away from underweight, overweight, and obese, they will calculate every year because you have your table you provide every year. You know what I'm saying?
So what you're saying is there a way that...
Yeah, if you say 0, 1, 2, the argument of the table,
Yeah.
age is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 90,
Yeah.
and you have different value.
Oh, you mean like if I made it, instead of just 0, 5, if I made it 0, 1, 2. No, you actually would, so I regret to tell you, you actually still would need to do that. The whole issue is, it's not smart enough to realize when anything has changed that it may need to recompute. This hazard is changing based on something. What is it changing based on? Changing based on this thing called age, right? And it doesn't know when the age changes. It doesn't automatically know. Because after all, we have to call current age. It's like, give me my current age. It doesn't know automatically that it's changed. So it doesn't know automatically to recalculate it. This transition could depend on a lot of other things. Let me give you an example. It could depend on an aspect of the current food environment, right? How many grocery stores versus convenience stores are around you. It could depend on an aspect of the physical activity environment, right? How many playgrounds and so on are there. It could depend on aspects of school physical activity programs, whether it's a walking school bus in effect. There are all sorts of things. And any logic doesn't automatically know when one of those aspects of the environment changes or when your age changes. So you have to tell it, okay, periodically go recompute what this hazard rate is so that if it has changed, it's taken into account. And that's what we're doing. And we're telling it basically, hey, once a year, change it to once a year because I think that's right. We probably don't need to, there's no real point doing it more than that. Go recompute what the chance is becoming overweight. And if we had lots of these other covariates in there, it would kind of look around and say, what sort of environment are you in? Are there any new parks? Are there any new physical activity programs? And it would return a value. And that would apply for the next year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not going to be able to, in general, compute how things change and know, oh, something changed, it's relevant to me. There are ways around this, and Dylan, maybe you could look into on-changed event in any logic, you can tell it this. But in general, you're going to need it to be recomputed, and this is an unfortunate common pain to put into place. It's just that in general, if a transition's hazard rate is changing based on context, and that context is not triggered by another state chart in the person changing, which is handled automatically, then you're going to need to do something like, hey, go recompute the hazard. It's painful, but it's not like breathtakingly hideous, at least in my view. Yeah.
So you can just call on change whenever you want or wherever you want.
To tell it like, hey, something changed.
Yeah. Now I do have a question though about this. So I've had to do this before, and in those cases the resolution didn't matter so much. But if you were to change that frequency, let's say from a year down to every minute, or to every week, or to every month, or every 10 years, does that actually make a difference in the rate going between normal and overweight? Like, does that skew it in a particular direction? That's not something I've never quite been clear on. I've never had to do this often enough to really have to think about it.
So it does change things slightly. There's a real diminishing returns, and my colleague Jack Homer talks about, he uses a term which I don't know is due to him purely. Jeff would probably know the history on this better than I, but he uses the term, which I'm rather fond of actually, false precision, that, you could put a huge amount of effort and say, oh, I got to have it recompute every 2 minutes, but really, the model has many approximations which are much more crude than that, and these things have opportunity costs. The fact that if we have this thing update every 2 minutes as to someone's age, you're probably going to improve the accuracy of the hazard rate by 10 10 to the minus 6th or something, and it's going to matter for one case of overweight out of every 10,000 or 100,000, and there are much bigger issues with the model in terms of accuracy than that. That's not where that's not where the action is. That's not the rate limiting factor. That's not the bottleneck. That's not the key thing that you should improve. And if you have limited time, these things matter because there's an opportunity cost. You put your time into that, and it takes time away for other things, or more to the point here, the model runs would take much longer to run. So you try to balance as a modeler, pragmatism of, look, this is probably good enough for now. Jeff uses the delightful analogy drawn from Pawson and Tilley, I believe, on realist analysis of, look, modeling is like, and this is true, frankly, I think, for statistical modeling in many ways, too. It's like trying to build a bridge across a swamp, and a pontoon bridge across a swamp. And, you do what's needed to get that bridge in place across the swamp, but you don't over-engineer it. You don't build a George Washington bridge, to go across this swamp and say, okay, we're going to need 10 years of analysis to go. You've got this task, you've got to get across the swamp to conduct emergency operations or whatever, and you put into place what is needed for you to get across. And if you discover that there's a problem with it, it's not adequate, you put in place more engineering. But you do what's needed to deliver the insights you need to learn and to move to the next stage. And one of the issues is models are a work in progress. They are learning tools, and often, we can sit back and think what needs to be in this model up front, but often we fool ourselves because, we put in lots of things, we anticipate needing lots of things, we put them in, and then when in the end comes down to it, we find that one of the things is the thing that really matters, and it goes off in a different direction. We don't need a lot of these extra pieces. So it's much better to build a model incrementally, step by step, learn from it, and figure out then prioritize what to put in next, than it is to plan on putting best, biggest model for a year from now and work towards that, only to find a year from now we don't need 80% of those things. You will, by building incrementally, you will get to a really nice model a year from now, but you will do so in a way that all along the way you have something working, and having learned along the way, the model you get to a year from now will be much more savvy. It'll be much more, it will incorporate the learning along the way. It will incorporate, a lot of the insights that have come along to prioritize what to put in next. So that's why I think it's so important, one of the reasons I think it's so important models be built incrementally. Now, you and I know as software engineers that to build the big system and then start it running it is madness. King Lear, in King Lear, Shakespeare has King Lear uttered, "That way lies madness." Actually, I think it's the fool who utters that. But the point is that if you build the big model a year from now and roll it out, it'll probably have some bugs in it, and it'll be hard to tell what's a bug, what's an emergent property. So if you build it incrementally, you can spot those bugs and learn in the process and develop confidence about it and show it to stakeholders and redirect it in a different direction as you learn. And that's a compelling set of value propositions. So build models incrementally, learning along the way, making sure they're working, comparing them to the previous version. You can get a lot of insight into what's going on in the model compared to if you run it all together a year from now. You say, wow, that's really interesting, but what's causing that? And it takes a long time to figure it out. Whereas if you build it incrementally, that behavior came in when I changed this or when I added this. It was really only when I added in the aspects of the physical activity impact of this aspect of the built environment that something changed, that this new phenomena appeared. And so when it comes to a year from now, when you see these complex dynamics, you know kind of where different pieces are coming from mostly, what's driving them. Anyway, I speak too voluminously. Yes?
So are you suggesting once you build the first version of model, you validate with the empirical data, and then build another element and validate again? Is that what you suggest?
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it. we have to understand a couple things, and I have a talk on models and data that I'm going to try to roll in here, but there's a couple issues. So the first issue is, yes, we want to roll out successive versions of model, and the first task is often to check this new version of the model and see, okay, does it exhibit behaviors which are sensible? Does it exhibit behaviors which are plausible? And that's something which that's often something which requires a little bit of running with the model to see, okay, is there something really broken here? Is there something which is not adding up? Something which is inconsistent? So you're doing a scan. Are there any plausible problems with this? And then what you're going to often do is, once you see that there's no obvious bug, that you get an error message saying it's out of range or whatever, right? Once there's no obvious bug, one thing you're going to want to do is compare it to the previous version of the model, because you probably changed one or two things. That's the whole thing about doing it incrementally. You change one or two things. How does what you're seeing now differ from before? As what has changed? That will tell you a lot about where behaviors are coming from. If you see, wow, left most of these things the same, but this thing that really changed, it gives you insights, and you take that down, your notes about the model. But then you'll often want to compare it against some sort of data externally. Now, we have to be careful, because when we talk about data and modeling, sometimes that's, and I don't know what your situation is like here in Australia with respect to access to data. We have pretty good access to certain types of data, so population law administrative data, and data from certain primary data collection exercises. But some of the data, for some of our models, some of the most important insights about data actually come not merely from survey instruments or large-scale data sets, but from cancer registries, large-scale registries, really valuable source of information, and we turn to them for certain types. But also we get some data from people who are on the front lines. Like if we're dealing with models having to do with patient flow within a system, we'll sit down with those who are in that system day in, day out, and ask, is this the sort of pattern you see, within your experience? It's eliciting sort of from their tacit knowledge about what they've seen, are these the sort of patterns you see? And that can often clue us into gaps in the model that we wouldn't have spotted otherwise. It taps into, as I say, their tacit knowledge, which they never wrote down, but they'll say, oh, come on, I never see something like that. I've never seen a pattern like that in my life. What we see more typically is like this. And now you've gotten something that will help you refine the model further. And it's this whole issue about not viewing the models as crystal ball that either is correct or failed, but it's rather using the model to learn and to improve it. Learn and improve it. So yes, we do often compare the model against empirical data and say, wow, it got really a lot closer to the empirical data at that point. But we're still missing this whole issue. We're still not aligning with respect to preschool kids and their obesity rate. So we're missing issues having to do with this important immigrant subpopulation where we're seeing much higher rates of obesity than what we see in the model. And so then that points us, gosh, we're doing pretty well on this side, maybe we got to prioritize this component. So you're kind of doing this dance with respect to the data. I will tell you though, I think data is great stuff, but when it comes to data, there have been a number of times in my modeling career where I found the model does not match with the data, and I pound my head against the wall trying to figure out what's wrong. I elaborate the model, I change assumptions and so on, and I cannot figure it out. I cannot get it to align with the data. And I've gone to the stakeholders and talked with them honestly and said, look, I'm getting this mismatch. And when I've done that on at least 4 occasions, 4 very prominent occasions, 4 poignant occasions in my memory, where I've really sweated it and felt, there's something really wrong with the model, they've told me, oh, don't worry about that time period, or don't worry about this that data is bunk, or we've known for a long time that they changed the definition in those 3 years for what counted as a TB case, or during those years, that year where you see that weird suddenly the model isn't matching anymore, that's when they redefined kindergarten to include preschoolers as well, the last year of preschool, and then it's like, okay, now finally it makes sense. It's not the model that's always wrong, it's sometimes the data has changed, the definition changed, there's inconsistency, there's sloppy data entry practices that afflict some of the data. And so we learn about the data. That's learning too, that's really valuable. And that's learning we wouldn't have had without the model to point out these inconsistencies. And that's another virtue of comparing the model on an ongoing basis against data. Finally, you'll find, gosh, do we have no data on this thing? We see the model matches really well this, but not that. We want to figure out what's wrong, where does the problem come in. Let's see if we can get data on this intermediate thing and figure that out. Dylan.
So I'm going to add 2 points to this. One of the projects that I'm working on right now, we're trying to calibrate to self-report data about stuff that is has some social stigma associated with it. And couldn't get certain things to line up, couldn't get certain stats making sense, and we ended up talking to some of the experts and said, oh yeah, that's probably underreported by about 50%. And we know none of these numbers are reasonable. So that insanity does come up at times, and so it's good to talk to the people who are generating this data. This said, just because you have a source of data sitting up front doesn't necessarily mean it's useful to your model in order to make it work. Like I'm sure you found at times that you build something and then you find out what data you need rather than starting with a huge store of data and then deriving a model.
Yeah, that's right. So later in this week, I'm going to be talking. So my group lies at the confluence of modeling and what I'd call elements of data science, or the bad term of big data. And I'm actually a big believer in potential value for turning many elements of big data into insight, but I believe that it's far more of a textured issue than most people let on, and I think furthermore that dynamic models have a huge role to play in that. More than that, I think that this huge amount of data that is becoming available through electronically sourced data, things like electronic health records, personal telemetry, the Fitbits and Jawbones of the world, but also epidemiological monitoring systems like our IFE system. These sorts of data can be extraordinarily valuable for grounding our models, for keeping them honest, for helping us spot inconsistencies. Because this is what modeling is about. It's about learning faster. It's about learning more robustly. And we can pin down a lot of elements of the model concerning health behavior and the micro behaviors people go through, whether it's contact patterns, mobility patterns, patterns of exposures, different aspects of the environment, the built environment, the food environment, aspects of other interaction with others for transmissions, knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and norms. Data, the growing amount of electronically sourced data can really pin down a lot of things. And I'll have to talk about this. I know some of you had expressed interest, quite a few had expressed interest in the pre-survey. But the fact is here that we're still evolving the best ways to do this. And I'll talk about some of the ways to accomplish this. But we still have a way to go to really tie those two together. And the other fact is, and this is critical, and this is something Jeff talks about quite a lot, and I believe it's a profound issue. Ladies and gentlemen, statistical models are incredibly valuable tools that complement dynamic models. And it would be very hard for us to build adequate dynamic models without recourse to the statistical counterparts, I believe. And because of that, I spend a lot of time these days engaged in competing risk analysis, or recurrent events analysis, or survival analysis, regression type analyses, etc. I do that stuff, and I really see the value, and they work really well with models. But the fact is, with dynamic modeling, we are in a somewhat different sphere. here for many questions. We are seeking to ask about counterfactuals. We are seeking to go in a direction where there is often not data available, to ask about situations which have never been observed before. And it is a big mistake to make our efforts and our aspirations in dynamic modeling purely contingent on the availability of data. Data is really valuable when you have it, but it is from a data generating process that will be altered often when you are in a counterfactual situation. Fancy terms, but what it really means is, you can't drive reliably looking out your back window. It will work while you're going around in a track, a perfectly circular track. But if you want to go off-road, if you want to talk about new interventions that shift, that bend the curve, that really shift substantively the situation out there in the world, we have to realize that even the best of data will be often altered by aspects of that. And we can't be timid in our modeling. Models help us, reason about counterfactuals, but sometimes we have to do so with uncertainty about how data items will be affected. And when we do so, we need to be honest and examine, using sensitivity analyses, robustness analyses, whether the modeling conclusions are resilient and robust to those uncertainties. But we can't let ourselves be hamstrung by a fear that data is not available, therefore we can't do any modeling. Some of the biggest modeling insights over the past half century have come from models where the relatively limited data, but there's big ahas from them. And we'll try to see if I can fold in a few of those this week. But what I'm saying is, we're in a somewhat different world. In the statistical world, we depend critically, statistical models depend on understanding the patterns associated with data and explaining the patterns associated with empirical observed data. With dynamic models, a lot of our attention is in these counterfactual situations where we will be moving beyond when data is available, and we have to deal with that as a matter of priority setting with models and not hold all our dynamic modeling up until data is available, because often then they will fall short of their potential to inform our understanding. So it is a somewhat different world than with statistical models. We're often dealing with a causal model with reasoning about these situations where data is not available. And from the standpoint of false precision, coming back to that earlier point, we need to realize that if we say, well, we won't model this at all because there's no data available, we may be giving it the one value, 0, that we know it does not have in the model, and we may shortchange ourselves. So, bit of philosophy there. So I had some slides in here, and you can find them in the. I won't spend a lot of time where I comment on this incremental model development. This is one of the biggest practical points. It will help you at many, many levels. It will help you in debugging. It will help raise stakeholder confidence. It will help you understand where patterns are coming from. It will help you build a more informed and a richer and more responsive model. So it is highly advised that incremental development be put into place. Okay, that's enough editorializing. Any questions about that? I love this questions that we've been getting. And again, answering questions is one of the most valuable things I think I can do here while we're together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this particular video here,